The sunset painted Jeju Island in shades of gold and blood, and the sea, silent, seemed to watch the couple arriving at Nami Palace Resort like someone witnessing the beginning of a tragedy foretold. The air was thick with salt and anticipation as the luxurious black car glided to the main entrance. When Tae-jun stepped out, the world around him seemed to bow. He was the man who transformed silence into authority and presence into intimidation. Behind him, Han Ji-min, his new wife, wore a smile that resembled a mask sculpted for the cameras. Every flash of the camera tried to capture the glamour of that moment, but what no one saw was the invisible chill between them. That honeymoon began not with love, but with a buried secret. As the staff hurried to attend to every detail, Tae-jun kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. The wind blew, bringing the distant murmur of the sea, a sound that seemed to whisper a name he was trying to forget. Ji-min, radiant in her white dress, held his, arm with the firmness of someone trying to hold on to a life slipping through their fingers. The hotel manager welcomed them with champagne and a bow, but behind the cordiality, there was a tension in the air. It was as if the resort itself knew their stay would not end well. As they entered the presidential suite, the luxury bordered on the unreal. Glass walls, fresh flowers, a panoramic ocean view. Everything was so perfect, like a carefully curated stage set. Jimin walked around enchanted, touching the furniture, praising the decor, until Tae-jun stopped abruptly. On the bed, two immaculate towels displayed a gold embroidery. Choi Min-ah. For a second, he thought it was a fantasy, but the crystal glasses confirmed the impossible. The same engraved name, glistening in the afternoon light. His heart skipped a beat. That name didn't belong to the present, but to a past he'd buried along with his unfulfilled promises. Jimin sensed the discomfort, but interpreted it as his usual coldness. The manager explained that the room had been prepared based on an old reservation made years before, and it was in that instant that Tae-jun understood. This place, chosen at random by his wife, was the same hotel he'd promised the woman he'd betrayed. Outside, the sea roared. Inside the room, time seemed suspended. Tae-jun felt the weight of something invisible settle over him, as if the walls were whispering accusations. With each step, the air grew thicker and the past closer. What he didn't know yet was that that honeymoon would be the stage for a revenge woven in silence. But who, after all, would have prepared all this for him? If this story already captivated you in the first few minutes, just imagine what's to come. Subscribe now and hit the bell, because the next chapter will leave you breathless. Outside, the night enveloped Nami Palace in an unsettling silence, while the sound of the sea crashing against the rocks seemed to whisper memories Han Tae-jun struggled to forget. All it took was a moment to close his eyes, for time to drag him back to that night in Seoul, the exact point where his empire began to crumble, and he didn't yet know it. The Hansol Group's main hall gleamed like an altar erected to arrogance. Crystal chandeliers reflected the gold and wine of the toasts, and executives toasted the CEO's genius and vision. Tae-jun, in the center, raised his glass like a modern king, next to his lover, Han Ji-min, stunning in a red dress that seemed made to be sinful. It was a celebration of power, but also of vanity. And he, intoxicated by both, didn't realize he was about to turn his own wife into a spectacle. Among the guests, moving with restrained dignity, was Choi Min-ah. Her simple white dress contrasted with the surrounding luxury, an uncomfortable reminder of purity amidst masks of hypocrisy. She hadn't been invited to watch, but to serve. Tae-jun had ordered his legitimate wife to work at the party, as a symbol of humility, when in reality he simply wanted to reassert his dominance. The murmurs grew louder. With each glass Min-ah poured, the awkwardness spread like a stain. Jimin watched, amused, as Tae-jun called her before everyone, raised his glass and coldly ordered, "Serve it right, Min-ah. Tonight is a special night." She hesitated only a second. Her hands trembled, but her gaze remained steady. She poured the wine delicately and replied, "Yes, Mr. Han." The room froze. The sentence sounded like an epitaph. No screams, no tears, just the piercing silence of a woman who realized that love had died. Min-ah gathered up the glasses and slipped out, taking with her something Tae-jun would never regain: respect. Later, alone, he stared at the reflection in the hall windows, his face distorted by the candlelight. For a moment, he tasted the bitter taste of guilt and drowned it with a sip of whiskey. Meanwhile, in the cold Seoul rain, Min-ah walked alone. And before she disappeared, she wrote a single sentence: "One day you'll wish I was still by your side." That night, she died to the past, and he began to die to himself. The rain fell lightly over Seoul that early morning, washing away the traces of the party that had ended in fake smiles and broken glasses. Inside the Han mansion, the silence was almost sacred, a cruel contrast to the chaos within. Choi Min-ah, packing her small suitcase in silence. The sound of the metal clasps echoed like a confession. Each folded item of clothing represented a memory she forced herself to bury, her heartbeat in time with the ticking of the wall clock, marking the time she could no longer recover. Her son slept soundly, unaware that at dawn his life would change forever. Min-ah watched him for a few seconds, stroking his hair tenderly and etching that face into her mind, as if she knew she might never see him the same way again. The boy, even in his dream, murmured something that made her hold back tears. He was calling for his father. Those 3 letters, Appa, pierced her chest like a final blow, but they also served as a spring in her step. She needed to go before her courage turned to regret. He walked to his office and left a white envelope on the mahogany desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper written in his delicate handwriting: "When pride suffocates you, remember me." No goodbyes, no accusations, just the truth, spoken with the same grace with which she bore the humiliation. Outside, the wind was biting, and the city lights seemed more distant than ever. The taxi waited at the gate, and the confused driver looked in the rearview mirror, trying to understand why such an elegant woman carried an inexplicable pain in her eyes. Min-ah held her son in her arms and looked out the window for the last time. The mansion's gate slowly closed, and with it, the cycle of a lifetime. The next morning, Han Tae-jun woke to a silence in the house. He called out to her, but only the echo answered. He found the envelope on the table, read the words without understanding, and something inside him wavered for a moment, but not long enough. "She'll come back," he murmured to himself, putting the note away in a drawer, as if filing away an irrelevant document. But time passed, and Min-ah didn't return. No phone calls, no clues, no trace. The newspapers soon turned the case into a scandal. CEO Han's wife disappears after public humiliation. Social media speculated, the press sensationalized, and he increasingly closed himself in his glass castle, surrounded by luxury, but tormented by an absence that grew like a ghost. In the company hallways, employees whispered, and even her name became forbidden. Tae-jun feigned strength, but the mirror revealed the dark circles under his eyes, the insomnia and the increasingly lost look in his eyes. The empire remained intact, but the man behind it was slowly crumbling. 2 years later, when the world already believed that Choi Min-ah had disappeared forever, fate would once again place Tae-jun before the reflection of his own arrogance, and the reunion with his past would begin with a marriage that should never have happened. 2 years have passed since that dawn when the lights in the mansion went out forever. For Choi Min-ah-hin's soul, time seemed to have done its job of erasing scandals and rebuilding reputations. Newspapers stopped mentioning the disappearance, and the public became accustomed to seeing Tae-jun again on the covers of business. Magazines, now alongside Han Ji-min, the woman who had replaced silence with the appearance of success. The wedding was a carefully planned event down to the last detail. Flowers imported from Japan, fashion reporters jostling for space on the hotel steps, distinguished guests smiling for the cameras. Jimin wore a shimmering dress that reflected the lights as if trying to blind anyone who dared to see beyond its surface. Tae-jun, in a white suit, looked too calm for someone who claimed to be happy. His gaze swept across the crowded hallway and, for a moment, seemed to be searching for someone who wasn't there. The celebrants spoke of union and new beginnings, but each word echoed distantly in his mind. He remembered the old altar reserved for Min-ah, the same one that had never been used. The audience saw a fulfilled man. Inside him, there was only the muffled sound of emptiness. When the couple exchanged rings, the flash of cameras illuminated Jimin's face, who smiled triumphantly, while his remained motionless, as if the act didn't belong to him. The reception continued with music, champagne, and applause. Jimin moved among the guests with the ease of someone who knows how to charm. He spoke of travel, fashion, and power. Tae-jun stood apart, responding mechanically, watching the glasses fill, remembering Minna's restrained gaze from that distant night. Every laugh around him was a disguised memory, every toast a reminder that he had traded love for. Appearance. When reporters asked about their honeymoon plans, Jimin answered first. Jeju, the paradise of new beginnings. The phrase sounded casual, but something inside him tightened. The same destination he'd promised his lost wife would now be the setting for his new showcase. Tae-jun simply nodded, keeping his face impassive, but feeling the weight of a coincidence that didn't seem like a coincidence. Hours later, alone in his hotel room, he looked out the window and saw his reflection multiplied in the surrounding buildings. A powerful, admired, and empty man. He tried to convince himself that everything was under control. The empire was thriving, his public image had been restored, his new wife had the perfect smile. But all he had to do was close his eyes and see the old note, the words engraved with calm and pain. When pride suffocates you, remember me. That night, as Jimin slept with a contented smile, Tae-jun quietly got up, lit a cigarette, and watched the smoke slowly rise, forming patterns that reminded him of the past. The sound of the rain hitting the windows again seemed to repeat the same name he was trying to forget. When the plane to Jeju took off a few days later, taking the couple on their dream honeymoon, Tae-jun still had no idea that he was about to revisit the same setting he had destined for the woman he swore to forget, and that every detail of that trip would bring back the ghost that never left him. The plane landed gently on the runway, surrounded by the turquoise sea of Jeju Island, and Tae-jun watched through the window as the waves crashed against the rocks as if the weather were trying to warn him of something. The sun reflected off the metal fuselage, illuminating his face. Han Ji-min, who wore a radiant smile ready to be photographed. She saw this trip as a symbol of victory, the prize for having won the most eligible man in Korea. But for Tae-jun, every mile traveled toward that destination seemed to bring him closer, to an echo he pretended not to hear. The car taking them to the resort cut through coastal roads lined with lavender fields and volcanic peaks. Jimin droned on and on about the romantic itinerary, the photos they would take, the places Min-ah would never have been. Tae-jun simply listened, staring out the window as if searching for something beyond the landscape. At every turn, fragmented memories surfaced. Min-ah's serene face, the glow of Seoul's lights reflected in her unshed tears, and the promise he never kept, a honeymoon in Jeju to start over. Now, fate was ironically claiming what had been left behind. Upon arriving at Nami Palace Resort, were greeted with bows and a flower-petaled aisle. Jimin, dazzled, clutched her husband's arm as if showing off a trophy. The attentive manager spoke of recent improvements, of the mysterious new owner who had invested millions to transform the resort into a luxury landmark. Tae-jun listened in silence, unaware that every inch of the place was imbued with memories that would make him bleed inside. The presidential suite awaited them with panoramic ocean views. The room exuded sophistication, but something about it felt familiar. The scent of flowers, the shape of the curtains, even the arrangement of the furniture. Jimin, delighted, opened the closet and found a set of robes embroidered with gold initials. H&M, he read aloud, smiling. Han and Min. Tae-jun felt his entire body stiffen. The receptionist's voice echoed fleetingly in his memory, Mrs. Choi Min-ah. Trying to hide it, he forced a laugh. It must be a coincidence, but Jimin's gaze narrowed. She could tell when something was bothering him, and she liked it. She walked over to him, touched his face with feigned tenderness and said, "Don't worry, love, the past is already buried." Tae-jun nodded, but inside, he felt like the past wasn't buried. It was about to resurface. As night fell, the couple went downstairs for the welcome dinner. The dimly lit dining room featured a table set with elaborate dishes and crystal glasses. As Tae-jun picked up the first glass to toast, he noticed the name engraved on the base, Choi Min-ah, Lua de Mel Han Sol. For a second, he gasped. The waiter, embarrassed, apologized, explaining that it was one of the old sets kept for sentimental value. Jimin noticed the discomfort and forced a mocking laugh. "Looks like your ghost still lives here, huh?" Tae-jun didn't answer. He stared at the distorted reflection in the crystal, where Minna's name flickered in the candlelight. Time suddenly no longer seemed like a line. It was a circle, and he had just returned to where it all began. As the guests toasted to love and success, Tae-jun felt a shiver run down his spine. Something in that place was watching, judging, breathing. He stood, walked to the balcony, and looked out at the sea. The waves crashed hard, and the cold wind seemed to whisper the name that haunted him. Min-ah. What Tae-jun didn't yet know was that this wouldn't be the last reminder of the past. The true punishment was just beginning, and every corner of that resort would reveal a fragment of the woman he thought he'd lost forever. The next morning, the sun rose timidly over the Jeju Sea, but inside the presidential suite, the atmosphere was one of invisible discomfort. Han Tae-jun woke up before from me. He put on his robe and walked out onto the balcony. The air carried the scent of salt and garden flowers, and for a moment he tried to convince himself it was all just a coincidence. However, the name engraved on the glasses, the embroidered towels, and the strange déjà vu of that suite wouldn't leave his mind. He felt as if the hotel itself were trying to remind him of something he'd sworn to bury. As he gazed at the horizon, a hotel employee knocked on the door with an envelope. "Mr. Han, the hotel wishes to extend a formal welcome," he said, bowing. Tae-jun took the envelope with a nod and waited for the man to leave. When he opened it, he found a card with elegant calligraphy and words in gold ink. "We hope this honeymoon is as memorable as the one that never was." His heart raced. No name, no signature. Just that enigmatic phrase, as if his own past were watching him from somewhere within the resort walls. Leaving the room, she found Jimin admiring the hall mirror. "You look tense, love," she teased, sliding her fingers over his chest. "Still thinking about your ex?" He forced a smile. "Don't. Make me laugh." But it didn't come. At breakfast, the discomfort took shape. The receptionist greeted them with a warm smile and said matter-of-factly, "It's an honor to have you back, Mr. Han and Ms. Choi Min-ah." Ji-min choked on her coffee. Tae-jun stood still for a second. The silence that followed was so piercing that the waiter stopped serving. "Sorry, sir," the woman stammered, embarrassed. "There must be a system error." Tae-jun merely nodded, but his expression betrayed something. Between astonishment and dread. Back in the suite, Ji-min exploded. "This ghost is still haunting you? I'm starting to think this hotel is possessed by her." Tae-jun didn't answer. He just stared at the mirror in front of the bed. Discreetly engraved in the bottom corner was something that hadn't been there before, the reflection of a nearly erased name. Minna he walked over, ran his finger over the glass, and the name seemed to disappear, as if it had never existed. Trying to compose himself, he asked for the room to be cleaned again. When the cleaning crew arrived, one of the elderly staff members looked at him and murmured, "I never thought you'd come back." Mrs. Choi said this day would come. Tae-jun felt his body go cold. "What did you say?" he asked, but the woman only smiled ruefully and replied, "Nothing, sir. I made a mistake." The day wore on, but his mind found no rest. At every corner of the resort, the past insinuated itself, the perfume wafting from the hallway, the soft music playing in the restaurant, the way the wind blew the curtains, identical to those in his old home in Seoul. Everything seemed meticulously calculated to remind him of what he'd done. That night, when he went down to dinner, he encountered the same waiter who had served the couple the night before. This time, the man held out a bottle of wine wrapped in a white bow. "Courtesy of the house, Mr. Han. It was reserved in your name 2 years ago for the honeymoon that never happened." Tae-jun looked at the label and felt his stomach churn. It was Min-ah's favorite wine. Ji-min, realizing, let out a bitter laugh. "Incredible, isn't it? Even fate wants to see you pay for what you did." He didn't answer. He picked up the bottle, opened it, poured a glass, and drank in silence. The taste was the same, sweet and bitter at the same time. For a moment, he swore he felt Minna's touch beside him, as if she were watching him. Her face, once obscured by guilt, now resurfaced in every shadow, in every reflection in the glass, in every note of the piano playing in the lobby. What Tae-jun didn't imagine was that fate had something even crueler in store. Because sometimes true punishment comes not in the form of memories, but in revelations. And the next revelation was about to shatter the last defense he had left, his pride. The bottle of wine was still on the table when Han Tae-jun returned to the suite. The lights reflected his rigid silhouette in the glass of the balcony, while the sea roared outside, mocking the serenity he was trying to forge. Ji-min, impatient, kicked off his shoes and regarded him with a look that mixed jealousy and contempt. "You know what irritates me the most?" he said, crossing his arms. "It's seeing that even this place still reminds you of her. It seems that even in death, she continues to dominate you." Tae-jun didn't answer. His silence spoke volumes. Ji-min leaned closer, touching his face with practiced tenderness. "Tell me, Tae-jun, do you still think about her when you close your eyes?" The touch cut him like a blade. He pulled away coldly. "Be careful what you say. The past is dead." But the words sounded empty, even to him. The next morning, he went down to reception, overcome with pent-up rage. He demanded an explanation for the hotel's mistakes, mistaken names, strange messages, personal belongings. The manager led him to a private room, opened a folder, and pulled out old documents. "Mr. Han," he said calmly, "everything you mention is registered under your own name. The reservations, the cards, the gifts. You did this yourself 2 years ago." Tae-jun pulled the papers out and felt the floor disappear. There was his signature and the reservation title, Lua de Mel de Han, Tae-jun e Choi Mina. He muttered in disbelief. That should have been cancelled. The manager replied regretfully, "There was never a cancellation, sir. Everything was paid in advance." Back in the suite, Tae-jun stood motionless, staring blankly into space. Jimin scoffed. "Maybe this hotel is her gift to you, a reminder of what you lost." He looked up wearily. "She never wanted to destroy me. I did that myself." An employee then appeared with an old box. Inside was an album with the name Mina and Tae-jun. On the last page, a sentence. "Everything that is built on humiliation collapses in silence." Tae-jun slammed the album shut. The sound echoed through the room. Pride finally gave way to shame, and something deeper began to awaken. Regret. Night fell over Jeju like a veil of regret. The wind beat against the windows of the Nami Palace and brought with it the distant sound of the sea, mixed with a soft, almost imperceptible melody that infiltrated the luxurious corridors of the resort. Han Tae-jun, exhausted, he tried to convince himself that it was just the surround sound system, but something about that music held him, made him remember the time when the home smelled of fresh coffee, and the sound of the piano echoed through the house. At dusk, it was the same song, the same arrangement, the same gentle touch of Choi Mina as he played for his son to sleep. Tae-jun's heart raced. He got up and followed the sound, driven by a mixture of guilt and need. He walked down the long, empty corridors, as if traversing his own past. The melody drew him to the main lobby, where the black grand piano gleamed in the pale light of the lamps. A woman sat at the piano, her back to him. Her brown hair, tied in a simple bun, reminded him of Mina's. Her body, her delicate posture, the gentle gestures of her hands, everything about her made him freeze. Tae-jun took a hesitant step. The sound of the wood creaking betrayed his presence. But the woman didn't stop playing. He whispered, almost voiceless, "Min-ah." The music stopped. Silence spread through the room like a mist. The woman slowly rose and walked in the opposite direction without turning her head. Tae-jun tried to follow her, but his body felt heavy, his feet anchored to the floor. When he finally reached the hallway, she had already disappeared, as if she had never been there. Only the piano remained open, and upon its keys rested an old score, yellowed with age. He leaned closer and read the handwritten words in the bottom corner of the sheet. "To the man who killed his own melody." A chill ran down his spine. Tae-jun tucked the sheet music into his trembling hands, looking around as if afraid of being watched. Everything was silent, but the air seemed charged. With vivid memories, he walked back to the suite slowly, feeling the weight of guilt follow him like a shadow. Jimin was waiting for him, sitting awake on the edge of the bed, her face pale and irritated. "Where have you been?" she asked, trying to sound indifferent. He didn't answer. He just held the crumpled paper, staring at the floor. "Did you see anyone?" she persisted. Tae-jun looked up, but his expression was different, distant, troubled, like someone who'd just spoken to a ghost. Jimin stood up, walked over and tried to snatch the paper from his hands, but he put it in his pocket. "What is this, Tae-jun?" she asked, now frightened. He replied in a low voice, almost a whisper, "It's the memory of everything I destroyed." But the night was not yet over. The true stroke of fate would come not in the form of sound, but of revelation. And the next morning, the man who believed he had seen a ghost would discover that the past had flesh, blood, and a new name engraved on the facade of the empire he thought he owned. The morning dawned shrouded in thick fog, and the sound of the waves sounded distant, as if even the sea avoided breaking the silence that dominated Nami Palace. Tae-jun walked down to the cafe with slow steps, his gaze vacant, his mind still trapped in the memories of the previous night. The sound of the piano, the mysterious note, the figure with his back turned, seemingly watching him from the shadows. It all seemed like a dream, or perhaps a warning he refused to understand. The staff greeted him formally, but there was something different in their eyes, an uncomfortable mix of respect and curiosity. Jimin, impatient, stirred her coffee carelessly, maintaining the arrogant tone of someone afraid of losing control of the scene. "You need to stop looking like you've seen a ghost," she said, forcing a smile. "We're here to look happy, remember?" Tae-jun didn't respond. His silence was answer enough. The manager approached with reverence and a slight tremor in his hands. "Mr. Han, excuse my intrusion, but the owner asked me to give you this." It was a beige envelope, sealed with gold wax and bearing an elegant coat of arms. Tae-jun noticed the inscription, "Nami Palace, owner CM." His heart skipped a beat. "Who's the owner?" he asked in a strained voice. "Ms. Choi Min-ah, sir. She bought the resort a year ago, full payment." Jimin stared at him in disbelief. "Impossible! She's dead!" Tae-jun broke the seal with trembling hands. Inside was a white card with unmistakable handwriting. "Thank you for finally using the gift you promised me. Signed, Choi Min-ah." The air left his lungs. Shame sliced through him like a cold blade. The hotel where he sought to show off his new wife belonged to the woman he had destroyed. Jimin stood up, furious. "Did you know that?" "No," he murmured, "but I think she always knew this day would come." From the terrace, Tae-jun gazed out at the sea. The wind blew hard, and amidst the sound of the waves, he could hear Min-ah's distant laughter. Fate, cruel and patient, had just revealed the first part of its revenge. But what would happen when he finally saw her again, alive, powerful, and unattainable? The late afternoon painted the Jeju sky in shades of fire and grey when Tae-jun walked through the garden of Nami Palace with hesitant steps. The wind blew the scent of the sea and magnolia blossoms, the same aroma that had once permeated the room of Choi Min-ah. Everything around seemed prepared by a destiny that silently awaited that moment, the inevitable reunion between the man who had destroyed love and the woman who had been reborn from pain. He saw her before he believed it. She was standing with her back to him, beside the garden's mirrored pond, watching the sunset's reflection. She wore a simple beige suit, her hair loose, and the same serene glow that always confused him between fragility and strength. Beside her, the small Min-jun, now 8 years old, held his hand. Tae-jun stopped a few meters away. Time stopped with him. The heart, which had long been beating only with ambition, now beat out of rhythm. Min-ah turned slowly. Her gaze held neither hatred nor love, only distance. A cold, hard-won calm enveloped every gesture. Tae-jun tried to say her name, but his voice faltered. "Min-ah, She raised her hand, asking for silence. "Don't say anything, Tae-jun. The man I loved died that night when he made me serve his mistress." His voice was firm, sharp, and tearless. "And do you know what was left after that? The woman you never believed I would be." Tae-jun stepped forward, his eyes welling up. "I looked for you. I thought—" "No," she interrupted, her voice bitter. "You sought relief, not me. I've learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's moving on even when the other person is still trapped in their own hell." Min-jun looked at his father blankly, but his mother guided him with a light touch on his shoulder. Tae-jun knelt, trying to hide his tears. He's so big," he murmured, his voice breaking. "He looks just like you." Min-ah looked at her son, then back at him, compassionate but unflinching. "He's the best of us both. What's left when pride is gone?" The silence that followed was so profound that even the wind seemed to hesitate. Tae-jun reached out, but Min-ah took a step back. "I didn't come to punish you, Tae-jun. Fate has already done that better than I ever could. I just came to thank you. It was the pain you gave me that taught me to walk alone." She turned and walked toward the garden exit. Her son followed her without looking back. Tae-jun remained motionless, his face illuminated by the last rays of sunlight, the same sun that was now saying goodbye, just as she was. But the night still held one final blow, because Tae-jun's true punishment wouldn't be loss. It would be the eternity of knowing that even with everything, he could never again possess what truly mattered. And that echo would stay with him until the end. The days that followed were long, silent, and cruel. Back in Seoul, Tae-jun watched the empire he had built with an iron fist begin to crumble like a sandcastle before the sea. Seoul Group, once a symbol of stability and dominance, now made headlines laden with scandal. Investors withdrawing support, contracts cancelled, shares plummeting. The man who once believed he could control the world now couldn't even control his own reflection in the mirror. In the office, the clock struck 3 in the morning. The city was asleep, but Tae-jun remained awake, surrounded by stacks of reports, empty whiskey bottles, and the echo of the silence that had once filled with applause. His gaze was lost, and his hands trembled. On the desk lay the old note, the one left by Choi Min-ah, lay yellowed with age. He opened it once more, slowly reading the words that now sounded like prophecy. "When pride suffocates you, remember me." And he remembered. Not an isolated mistake, but a lifetime built on vanity and arrogance. He remembered the woman who looked at him tenderly even when he hurt her. He remembered the son who called him a hero before he learned what disappointment was. He remembered how he mistook respect for power and love for possession. The phone rang. On the other end of the line, Han Ji-min, the wife who now revealed her true face, cold, calculating, impatient. "It's over, Tae-jun. I'm leaving. You're a ruined man, and I don't sleep with losers." The call ended before he could answer. The dry ring of the phone echoed like the crack of a sentence. Tae-jun walked to the window. From above, he saw Seoul as a graveyard of lights, each building a reminder of empty achievements. For the first time in decades, he felt small, irrelevant, human. The cold wind blew through the window, ruffling his papers and bringing an almost liberating sensation. His pride, finally, was dying. He picked up Minna's note once more and held it to his chest. The tears fell, unabated, mingling with the distant sound of thunder. The man who ruled corporations, who commanded multitudes, could now barely stand. But fate, merciless in its ironies, still had one last encounter in store for him. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come as consolation, it comes as a mirror. And that mirror, reflected in the serene figure of a woman who no longer hated him, would be the final blow that would make him understand the true meaning of the word forgiveness. Months have passed. Since the collapse of Seoul Group and the name Tae-jun, once synonymous with power and prestige, had become nothing more than a forgotten whisper among the old headlines. The city moved on, shareholders found new faces to admire, and the world that once bowed before him now ignored him with the indifference reserved for those who had fallen from their pedestals. But paradoxically, in that oblivion, Tae-jun found something he had never known: silence. And it was in that silence that he began to understand the depth of the void he had left within and without himself. On a cool autumn afternoon, walking down a quiet street in the Jongno district, he spotted a poster for a charity event sponsored by Choi Min-ah Foundation. The name hit him like a breeze and a blade at the same time. Without thinking, he walked to the venue. The auditorium was filled with ordinary people, women and children being attended to, and on the stage, under the soft light of the spotlights, was she, Min-ah. He, dressed with discreet elegance, his calm voice echoing between the chairs with the same serenity that once filled his house with music. Pain is a school, and forgiveness, a diploma that few can earn, she said. There is no greater victory than transforming suffering into strength and the past into learning. Tae-jun stood at the back of the room, watching silently. No one recognized him. He wasn't there to be seen, but to understand. Her every word rang like a mirror. No rancor, no irony, just truth. When she finished her speech, the audience gave a standing ovation. He, motionless, kept his eyes fixed on her until the applause faded. As he stepped outside, the cold wind enveloped him again, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. A sad, sincere, and human smile. He walked slowly through the streets of Seoul, carrying only Minna's old note, now folded in his coat pocket. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and he thought about how long it took him to understand that love isn't destroyed by humiliation, it just changes form. The past would never be erased, but in that moment, Tae-jun understood. Some losses are the only way to find yourself. And as the man disappeared into the city lights, a soft voice echoed to the audience. Pride takes its toll, but forgiveness sets you free. What about you? Are you ready to let go of the past? If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Because fate always has another twist in store for those who believe in love, regret, and second chances.